Hello, Mike. This is Haresh here.
Welcome to CESMII, the Smart Manufacturing Institute, manufacturing voice of innovation, powering the smart manufacturing movement. As an energized ecosystem, we are unique. We work tirelessly to drive industry's productivity and competitiveness ahead in the United States. We are built on the network of our dedicated members' active leadership and engagement. At CESMII, we see a way forward, and we recognize industry's need for a clearer, more actionable vision for the smart, data-driven future of manufacturing. Growing manufacturing's productivity, sustainability, and competitiveness. We seek to revolutionize manufacturing by obliterating the barriers for rapid change and innovation. Manufacturing of tomorrow is an exciting space. The innovators, trailblazers, and makers all thrive, where our brand is truly home.
Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's webcast. My name is Mike Yost, and I am the host of today's webcast, and I'd like to welcome everybody here today. We're going to be joined in just a few minutes by Haresh Malkani, who's the Chief Technology Officer at CESMII, the Smart Manufacturing Institute. Before we get started, I just wanted to talk about a few things with regard to the webcast itself. So first of all, everyone's microphones will be muted. So we'd ask you to keep your line muted throughout the webcast. Also, you may notice that there are video panels. My video should be showing through to you, as will Haresh is here shortly. There are options for those thumbnails. By clicking on them, you can make them bigger or smaller or minimize them to get them out of the way. So that is at your control as an individual. The format of this webcast is that it's going to be a 20-minute conversation between myself and the invited guest today, Haresh. We are going to be moving pretty quickly. The idea behind this series is that we're going to learn more together as an ecosystem by talking with each other and getting varying points of view as far as how people view what smart manufacturing is, what it isn't, what's working, what needs fixed, all those sorts of things. So we're going to move pretty quickly and continue to invite guests in from across the manufacturing ecosystem and get people's points of view. So I encourage anybody that has questions, you can email them to me. My email address is on the screen there, and I will return the emails and answer any questions that you have. Beyond that, we're also going to take these recordings. This session is being recorded. We will post these sessions online as they are produced and offer and try to encourage everybody to continue the dialogue and continue the discussion online. So with that, I'm going to ask Haresh, if you are there, to turn on your video, and we will get started with our conversation. First of all, as I start every one of these sessions, just pose the question to you, Haresh. What does smart manufacturing look like to you? And we'll jump into our discussion. So
thanks for having me here. I'm excited to speak to all of you. Again, I think this is a topic that is of extreme importance and interest, not for us as an institute, but manufacturing in general. And you know, we've actually been in the last 5 or 10 years or so where you heard expressions like Industry 4.0, you heard big data, you heard you know, manufacturing 4.0, smart manufacturing, and as I've sort of listened to that, and I've interfaced with people who are in that field, it's become very clear to me that there are some very common elements to all of these headlines that we see. And I think the main difference here is that while manufacturing, it's not that when we did manufacturing in the last couple of decades or so, that we are not smart about it. It's, I think, how we are able to leverage information and make manufacturing smarter. So that's really the theme of smart manufacturing from my point of view.
And I think just for background, so everybody knows, Haresh, with your position, you're responsible for the technology strategy at the U.S.'s National Institute on Smart Manufacturing. So your viewpoint on this topic, especially as it applies from a technology perspective, has implications of where the Institute directs research and funding dollars and projects and such. So I know you had provided me a couple of slides as backdrop. So I'm going to go to the first slide and just ask you maybe to speak to that point from a technology perspective. And exactly to your point, not implying or inferring that the people or the manufacturers themselves were not smart in the past or doing what they can to work as well informed as possible. But there are obviously evolving and new technologies that have come about that are enabling us to be smarter, if you will. So you want to talk from a technology perspective about those technologies?
Yeah, absolutely, Mike. So I think what has happened in the last several years is that you've become very aware of how inexpensive sensing has become, right? You have sensors embedded in your phones, you have sensors embedded wherever you drive, in your automobiles, in your buildings, and so on. And that's as a result of the fact that sensing technologies themselves have become more cost effective and inexpensive. So the availability of data from things and devices and environments has become very easy to do. The other important factor is that getting information from these devices through connectivity that's everywhere, right, is a very critical element of why we are where we are today, right? So it's not like you have a sensor somewhere that needs to be connected to your infrastructure in the plant, and then somebody has to do some magic to make that data point available to you on a dashboard, right? You've got this connectivity that's everywhere in your plant floor now. There's wireless systems, there's new technologies like 5G coming in, and that makes that even easier. So that's an important element of what's different now. And the third is that it used to be that if you wanted to do some heavy computing on the information that you're receiving from the plant floor, you would have to have your own servers. You would have to have internal talent that was required to actually build some models so that you could start predicting and making some sense of what you're seeing. Now you have cloud computing where a lot of these resources, both from a computing standpoint as well as applications, are actually available to you without the use of your own infrastructure in the plant. So the combination of these three are very critical, right? This is a very sort of it's a turning point in manufacturing, and that's what makes what we're calling smart manufacturing possible, right? So whether you think about what are known as IoT platforms, or whether you think about companies actually investing a lot of money in their own infrastructure to be able to do that, all that is enabled because of these three factors.
Right, and I think going back to personal experience, where I spent the past decade working with an industrial nonprofit, having conversations about these technologies as they're evolving. One of the things that was most interesting to me is that cloud computing actually never got much discussion in those circles for a very interesting reason. First of all, there was this perception of it's never going to happen here in manufacturing, so we're not going to discuss it. And then seemingly overnight it went to, well, that's already here and we're doing it, so we don't need to discuss it anymore. So I certainly think the impact of cloud and the computational capabilities and the connectivity capabilities and all of that brings with it is truly having an impact. And that was one of the most stark things that I saw in that experience.
Sure.
Do you see it also from your perspective? I guess sticking with cloud for just a minute, do you see I guess your experience. Obviously, you before coming to the institute, you were working in industry. Any insights there as far as how you're seeing industry being willing to accept these new types of technologies like cloud?
Yeah. So again, I think it's an excellent point, because no matter what we do with our solutions that make up smart manufacturing, is that we have to be aware of the security space, right? And security has different flavors, obviously. One, it's you think about data that is absolutely critical to your business, right? So then it becomes a question around proprietary data, being able to protect your IP, and so on. So if you're on the shop floor and if you're actually involved in the manufacturing process, you worry about that. But you also need to run your organization effectively. And for that to happen, you have to expose that information to the different layers in the organization. And that's where this whole idea of what is that important piece of data that actually needs to be bubbled up at the enterprise level versus kept secure underneath, right? And those are conversations that we will have with every manufacturer. So there's no one single solution for that. In a lot of cases, in my former company, for example, there were production operations where, you could say that, yeah, I mean, I don't mind sending this data to the cloud.
Right.
In another part of the company, they said, well, this is very critical for us because of our customers, and we cannot expose this data.
Right.
So there's going to be a variety there, and we need to work through those.
Yeah, and I think that's another really important and interesting point as people look at the value. I mean, you can go back and look at the industry analyst reports over the last several years. The value of the data that's locked away inside of manufacturing is pointed to as one of the largest pools of untapped potential for the value of in the Internet of Things. Right, seeing projections of it being as much as 27% of the entire value at stake for the Internet of Everything across all sectors comes from manufacturing centric sensors and data and such. So that point of why would we do it? What's the value of doing it? How does it drive our competitiveness, our competitive positioning, our competitive differentiation? All of those things are starting to bubble up to a very strategic, very high level, even nationally, globally. People are looking at that and saying, what's the value of the data? And then going down the path where you said, well, what can we do with it? What can't we do with it? How do we secure it? Things like that.
Sure.
Yeah. So I guess sort of sticking with that theme, I'm going to switch here and talk about a diagram that you use to talk about the basic blocks and information flows and such. And so obviously, as we look at and determine what the value is and say we want to go ahead, we want to have access to the data, we want to contextualize that and know how to drive value with it. What are you seeing as far as the challenges or all of the building blocks, if you will, required, and challenges that are in the way that you and your team are working to resolve?
Yeah, so I think a couple of comments. If you really look at what we have been doing in manufacturing, there are many great pockets of excellence everywhere, right? So if you look at this entire space, there are people who are doing real-time sensing. There are people who are doing real-time control, model-based control of their processes, and they're doing it extremely well. What has changed is the ability to leverage information at scales that are, an order of magnitude higher. And so an example might be that you might have a great control system for your extrusion press, right? But then the lubricant that is being used in that extrusion press, the environment that the press lives in, the material that is being fed to the extrusion press, these are all pieces of data that you can actually bring to bear on how well you control the process. And so in this diagram, for example, on the left-hand side, in the left bottom, is the basic bread and butter, right? Sensing and control. But then if you start bringing additional information for context, and then utilize that information to do a level of analysis and a level of modeling that actually brings together multiple aspects that are beyond just the sensing and control part, now you have value that was not seen before, right? So the ability to go from something that is considered more or less a reactive approach, that you sense something, you see something, you control it, to being able to use information that is much broader in context. And now you have the ability to become more predictive and proactive rather than just reacting to what's going on. So that's really the essence of this diagram. So all the ones that are in the dark blue are the key building blocks of functions that need to exist in a smart manufacturing system. But more importantly, the flow of information between each of these blocks is absolutely critical, right? So you will see that the focus these days is how that data moves from one to another, and what is the manner in which the data needs to move so that it becomes frictionless. So the term frictionless applies to saying that if you are an engineer who's doing the analytics and you're meeting an engineer who's doing the sensing, you guys don't have to worry about how the data is exchanged, right? Make it simple, make it seamless, make it cost effective. And that's the power of what we're doing today. And we as in the collective we.
Well, piece of cake, right? I mean, we have more data, we have more data, we have more sensors, right? It should be easy for us to make that happen, right?
Yeah, and you heard the statistics, right? I mean, you'll see different numbers out there, and people will say, okay, well, out of the data that we have from the shop floor, only 20% is off use, right? But that's all about developing the context. If you don't have the context, it's not really useful to do that.
So can you elaborate what the contextualization is?
I'm going to ask you to hold the questions, please, and submit them by email. We will reply back by email directly to your question.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. So yeah, Haresh, just we only have a few minutes left here. We have about 2 or 3 minutes left. Talk about for a minute the Institute, your direction based off of this diagram and these friction points, or what needs to be removed to make the flow of information frictionless, like you're talking about, and how you and your team in the Institute are working to build the technologies out, test things, prove out capabilities that will be for the greater good.
Sure. So the way the Institute works is that, when you look at this entire space, there are significant gaps in each of these blocks, for example, right? We have to sort of fill those gaps in certain industries. Sensing, for example, you might have a case where you need a sensor that has to live in a harsh environment and be able to transmit the data without any loss, for example, right? So we're looking at gaps in each of these blocks and saying, as an institute, we have a mandate and we have the federal funding available to actually launch projects that are looking at critical gaps in this space and how we fill them. So our membership will come together with proposals on projects. We will identify the areas of interest, and we'll actually launch these projects. So as you know, we're launching 10 projects from the previous request for proposal. We set out another request for proposal just recently, and we'll continue to do that. So we use the means of the federal funding to launch some of these critical projects that are helping build the technologies. The other piece of this is that we are also investing a significant amount of investment dollars in the black arrows, right? The information flow. And so the other half of the technology piece for the Institute is this platform. It's a smart manufacturing platform that allows you to move information between these blocks, move information from your assets to the cloud, for example, but do it in a fashion that is more reusable, repeatable, and scalable, right? Today's solutions don't necessarily do that. So that's really the focus of the Institute. And this has to go along with all the other aspects of smart manufacturing, like workforce development, right? I mean, you can't just depend only on technology to do that.
Right. Excellent. Well, we are down to the end here. So in the next 30 or 60 seconds, Haresh, could you just give us your main takeaway? If someone grabbed you on the street and said, what does smart manufacturing look like to you, or what advice would you give people to engage and start or continue on their journey? How would you concisely guide them?
Yeah, so I think in a very simple sort of sentence, it's the ability to leverage information to make smarter decisions, and it comes through the technologies that we've been talking about, right? That's at a very basic level. But in terms of companies that are going down this journey and beginning, I always say that you have to have a very compelling vision for what you want to do in the long term, and then take a slice of that and look for some win-win situations at a smaller scale. Prove the value. Start small, have some quick wins, and then once you are successful in that, just feed the frenzy. Because one of the things that I'm finding is that's tougher than technology is the culture, right? You have to
Yes.
get your people on board, and the way you do that is you show them value in your small wins, but make sure that they also understand that this is towards a larger vision, right? And then get them to support that vision for you.
Excellent. And I think we got a new hashtag, feed the frenzy. I like that a lot. That's fantastic. So, appreciate the time, Haresh. I know it's short, and just for everybody on the line here, our goal with this webcast series is to keep things brief, is to keep people showing up. So as mentioned during the webcast, if you have questions, please email me. If you have topics that want to be covered, if you have people that you think should be on here and give their point of view, if you want to be here and give your point of view, please email me and let me know. I'm glad to pull in as many different viewpoints as we can. And with regard to that, our next session will be August 14th, same time. And we will be joined by the chairman of MESA International Smart Manufacturing Working Group, Conrad Leva, who represents broadly the manufacturing ecosystem. And we're going to ask him to talk about his experience and what smart manufacturing looks like across that entire manufacturing ecosystem. So with that, we'll close. Thank you all for being here, and wish you all a great day. Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay.